I was somewhere between Flagstaff and Winslow on Route 66, the kind of stretch where the desert doesn't so much surround you as it climbs into the cabin and sits beside you. Midnight had slipped by, and the windshield carried a skin of dust that the wipers never quite erased, just smeared into faint strokes. The radio was moody, a hiss, a pop, the impression of someone inhaling through cloth, then only the engine's steady drone. No moon, only thin mercury threads of cloud. I kept checking the gauges like talismans. The fuel needle said I was fine but trembled as if spooked. The temperature sat a hair shy of normal. The clock blinked from 12:04 to 12:05, and then, even though I'd been driving a while, back to 12:04, as if time caught a toe on a frayed carpet. I laughed at myself and swallowed the taste of warm plastic and road grit. The mile marker came up. 2:37. A white tooth against the black brush. I've seen it before. Everyone who drives this seam in the dark collects its number in their memory. I watched it slide behind me in the rear view, a small truth disappearing. A few minutes later it appeared again. Not another number, the same one. 2:37. The same bullet dents in the post. The same tiny weed stooped at its base like a priest. Fatigue does that, I told myself. It copies and pastes the world. But fatigue doesn't usually make the radio turn itself on. A thin voice, no words, only a shape of words, surfaced and sank. I thumbed the knob off. The desert got louder in the silence, as deserts do. Every seam in the dash ticked. The seatbelt buckle chimed against the door when I hit a small hollow. My headlights tunneled forward, revealing no car ahead, no car behind. Just an old road that felt newer than my memory of it. Like someone had sanded it down and laid it back for me alone. The second time I passed the marker, I slowed to 25. I looked for a trick, a side road curling back, an S-curve, anything. There wasn't. I pushed the accelerator. The car answered. The dark answered back. The sign was older than the paint that clung to it. Gas. 2 miles. The arrow pointed ahead like a lazy finger. It wasn't on my phone map. It wasn't on the paper atlas tucked under the passenger floor mat. I would have remembered it. There's a way certain fonts from the 50s snag your attention like a burr. I told myself there was no harm in topping off. Long stretches out here don't forgive optimism. The asphalt wore a slight crown, and the car drifted almost imperceptibly right, as if drawn. I corrected without thinking, and kept one eye out for the glow stations throw up against the horizon. Nothing. Just a dull throb of sky, and a pale seam of distant mesas. Another gas, 2 miles sign arrived. And it was not simply another. It was the same. A diagonal scar raked across the letter G. The bullet peen at the lip, where some bored kid had hammered the edge. The S bent like it was tired of standing. The identical clump of devil's claw cactus at its base. I drove past it and glanced back. It did not recede the way things normally do. It shuddered, as if deciding whether to keep existing after I was finished looking. All at once the cabin cooled, but I hadn't touched the air. The fan wheel sat at the same notch. The vents breathed a refrigerated museum smell, the kind of cold that remembers hands that once turned these knobs. I kept my foot steady. I thought about the people who had driven this road before me. Truckers with thermoses, honeymooners nursing their last $20, salesmen, the kind who practice their smiles in the rear view. 2 miles is a small promise you give to yourself. The second sign made a liar out of it. I drove 3, 4, 5 miles by the odometer, and still the darkness kept its mouth shut. The radio tried again, rose and fell, catching a syllable or two from some station I didn't know existed. Don't stop here. It could have been a preacher, a prank, or the way static sometimes arranges itself into warnings when you need one. Then, just as I decided to turn around, a faint crust of neon breathed on the horizon. It pulsed like an injured thing. The station had recently lost the argument with the century. The neon around the canopy bled in and out, and the open sign wore its O and N, but had long since buried its P and E. The pumps were the slim-hipped kind you see in sepia photographs, numbers behind little glass windows. The price flashing was either a joke programmed into the ancient guts of the thing, or a ghost arithmetic. 39 cents a gallon. The gravel under the tires crackled. I rolled to a stop, killed the engine. With the engine dead, the night added new instruments to the score. The soft seesaw of the canopy metal shifting, the rattle in a length of loose chain, a bat performing a quick stitch across the edge of my high beams. And behind glass, faint and filthy, the office. A fluorescent hum stammered inside. The phone rang. I didn't realize what the sound was at first. It arrived without the shape of a modern ringtone. Just the raw bell of an old payphone yanked straight out of a movie I hadn't meant to watch. One ring. 2. 3. I stood still and listened to my heart throw its weight against my ribs. And then I laughed because if a payphone rings in a dead gas station and no one answers, the universe remains intact. By the door, a palm-shaped smear ran across the inside of the glass as if someone had once pressed both hands there and slid down. The office clock read 12:07. If it was broken, it had chosen a convincingly eerie time to die. If it wasn't, time had learned to hold its breath. A road map hung on the wall with thumbtack acne around places I recognized. 2 guns, twin arrows, meteor crater. Someone had circled the space where I was standing in a loop of red ballpoint that had faded to a tea-colored bruise. Next to the register lay a ledger, hand-done entries halting in 1973. The last line ended with a shaky paid, 2 gal, and a name I didn't try to pronounce. The phone rang again. 4th time, 5th. I crossed the threshold, because there are urges you don't understand until you obey them. I pushed the door and got the sound you always get in stories, but rarely in life. A long, theatrical moan of hinge that seemed engineered to announce me to whatever had been waiting. The smell inside had strata, paper that had slept in dust for decades, hot electronics that never quite switched off from their last job, a ribbon of burned oil. The phone stopped mid-ring, not because the call had ended, but because I was inside and some rule had been satisfied. The fluorescent tube rattled like a thin bone, complaining. Every time my breathing changed, its pitch answered, as if it were listening. There was a desk with a drawer that hadn't closed square in years. I jiggled it open and found photographs unerased by light. The station in crisp black and white, the awning new, the pumps proud, men posing with cigarettes tucked behind their ears. One photo had no men, just the forecourt and a car at the left-hand pump. My make, my color, my slightly misaligned front plate. Pencil on the back read, April '74. I tried to assemble a set of rational explanations and found them all a bit rickety. Footsteps in the gravel then, 3 measured compressions, a pause, 2 more. The kind of gait you associate with someone thinking about whether to join you or not. I went to the window and saw nothing but the angled world my own reflection created. My reflection didn't move when I did, not at first. It lagged a half beat behind, correcting late. "Can I help you?" a voice asked, nowhere and everywhere at once, perfectly neutral, as though read off a script. The fluorescent shivered. I decided to leave before I made a second decision I couldn't undo. When I reached for the door, it tried to close of its own tired momentum, swung in, bumped my shoulder like the gentle tap of a stranger at a crowded bar. I turned the knob and put my palm against the glass. It was colder than glass has a right to be in Arizona at midnight. Cold like a hand that doesn't believe in you. I let the door thud shut and sat there with my hands on the wheel, a caricature of calm breathing, until something like oxygen found me again. Before I turned the key, I checked the rear view out of habit, and habit rewarded me with a miracle I did not want. 3 palm prints brushed in dust across the inside of the back glass, as if someone had leaned there to read what I was reading. They were not there when I pulled in. I twisted around so fast the seatbelt yanked my shirt. The car was empty, except for me and the 2 strange passengers I carry everywhere, explanations and denial. On the passenger seat, the fabric held a small dip, as though someone had sat briefly, maybe a child, maybe a man who had forgotten how to be heavy. I pressed a thumb into the cushion, and it didn't spring back right away. Out at the left-hand pump, the numbers in the little windows had started to move without music. Ticks of gallons and pennies advanced with hush-puppy deliberation. I watched the sale roll past $1, then stop at $1.13, an amount that sounded like a memory clearing its throat. No hose lifted, no click of handle. I cranked the window down. The night pushed in its chemistry set, creosote and dust and something sharply sweet like fresh gasoline. I waited for the wet slap of a spill on the concrete, but the concrete stayed the color of old teeth. The radio gave me an AM station from nowhere. The voice, a woman's or a man's, pitched carefully between both, said, as if to someone who was having difficulty with directions, "Don't forget to check your mirrors." I checked them. The rear view held the mile of nothing behind me, and those harmless, impossible prints. The side view on the passenger door held a slice of the office window. For a single pulse of time, the silhouette of a head and shoulders occupied the window, like a stamp pressed into wax. When I looked directly at the office, it was empty, the fluorescent whining at a different key. I turned the key. The engine caught and shook once, twice, and then waited like a dog who has learned the meaning of stay. I rolled out under the eaves of the night and saw the station fall away in the mirror. Smaller, smaller, then more like a smudge than a building. I told myself that distance is an antidote. I told myself that whatever a place has to say, it says it only to the ones who stay. The antidote failed. The 2:37 marker came up a third time like a joke that thinks it's a proverb. I slowed to the kind of speed that annoys even saints. The road did not bend in a way that would allow trickery. It lay like a ribbon ironed flat. And still, I passed the number that had learned my name. Far ahead, a figure arranged itself from shadow. Not someone walking, not someone waving for help, someone simply occupying the exact center of the lane, patient as a photograph. I clicked my brights. The light found him and then unfound him, bleaching whatever he wore into the color of surrender. The shoulders were wrong, set a fraction too high, as if their owner had been made from a description rather than a body. 30 miles per hour. 20. 10. The brakes whispered. I kept space between us the way you keep space from a ledge. When I was a child, my father told me the desert plays fair. If something is there, it is there. If it isn't, it isn't. The desert broke its promise. He vanished between one breath and the next. No flinch into sagebrush. No dash to the side. The air the headlights touched was the same air, just emptied. I rolled forward and found only the lane and its yellow line. A small rabbit frozen off to the right with one eye taking in an apocalypse I could not see. I drove. The road took that as permission and repeated itself. Another 237. The figure again, nearer this time as if the road were learning my habits and timing its performance better. I braked harder and heard my seatbelt lock. The figure stood a hand's width from the hood. I did not close my eyes. The hood did not dent. My chest hurt the way it hurts when you dream you've been running. Then the figure was behind me, reflected in the rear glass, occupying the seat where an impossible weight had pressed the cushion. I did not turn around. The desert and I both know some courtesies. Change something, and the world changes. This has always been my superstition. A nameless turnoff presented itself, a chalky mouth where the pavement frayed into dirt. I took it left, eased the wheels onto it, felt the car recalibrate to the give of the ground. Sagebrush scratched the belly. The sky behind me seemed a shade lighter, as if dawn had begun in a country I was not invited to. 5 miles by the trip meter, 6. The dirt narrowed, then widened, then civilized itself into macadam again, fresh and unsuspecting. The neon appeared ahead, sighing, as if I were late to an appointment I hadn't known I had. It was the same station stitched back into the earth like a scar, the canopy, the wrongfully hopeful, open, the glass office with its clock submitting to 12:07 like a patient who had agreed to wait as long as it takes. I let the car idle and felt the way a loop feels when it realizes you've recognized it. My phone had no bars, a clean desert zero. That should have been the end of its options. Yet a red banner fluttered across the top of the screen and vanished. Turn around. No source, no sender. A command that is also a prayer. The radio kicked against its own deadness and found a smear of AM. The voice came in chopped, syllables stamped by static. Don't forget. Your mirrors. Don't forget. Your mirrors. The phrase took on the quality of those instructions you receive upon waking from anesthesia. You understand, and you don't. I checked the rear view and saw at first nothing novel. The road, the absence of cars, my own small moving storm of dust. Then, minute by minute, as I watched, a sequence of white lights assembled at a distance. One, then another, then a parade of them. Each separated exactly by the time it takes a patient person to count to 3. They advanced, but when I glanced forward to cross-check, the highway ahead was empty. I looked back and felt the shape of an answer. I was watching myself arrive from all the times I'd already tried to leave. People say the desert is empty. They mean it politely. What they don't say is that the desert keeps what you drop. Time, names, the imprint of a car seat where no one sat, and hands it back to you with interest. I don't remember escaping in any cinematic way. There was no cleverness, no trick, only a stubbornness that finally matched the roads. The darkness thinned by imperceptible degrees. First the horizon had a bruise, then the bruise blushed, then the abandoned geometry of the desert showed its bones. I came up on Seligman the way survivors find shore, suddenly aware of color. A roadside diner threw a warm square of light onto the gravel. The bell on the door announced me to the smell of coffee that had known reheating and the low citizenship of a handful of locals spaced along the counter. I did not tell a story. I ordered eggs and watched my hands try to steady themselves around a fork. When the waitress topped my cup, I asked a neutral question made of other people's curiosity. Is there an old gas station east of town? Kind of half working? She did not make a face. She simply shrugged like a person resigned to the neighborhood's habits. There was, she said. Burned in the mid-70s after a wreck. Kids used to dare each other to camp there. Sheriff told them not to. Folks don't go by at night. She added cream to a cup that wasn't mine and moved on. Broad daylight makes a bully out of us. I drove back along the shoulder with the sun high enough to make liars of shadows. Where the station had stood the night before, there was a concrete slab split by freeze and heat, a spill of blackened steel, and a stack of bricks the color of old blood. The office existed as outlines. The clock, if it had ever been real, ticked only in my head. 12:07. I got out. The wind did its small chores among the weeds. Something in the dust suggested tire arcs too fresh to be archaeological, and they matched my tread. I refused the idea, and it refused me back. At the diner, when I paid, I discovered a slip of paper in my wallet that I do not remember ever touching. It was a receipt, thin, fragile, ready to tear, bearing a logo of the station in cartoonish optimism and a date smudged by time. APR 12, 1974. Paid, 2 gal. The ink had the exhausted purple of an ancient ribbon. It did not look like a prop. It looked like the sort of document that will deny you sleep only if you let it. I slid it back where it had appeared. I got in my car. The mile markers along the way behaved themselves, counting up with the agreeable arithmetic of noon. I do not drive that segment at night anymore. The desert is full of people who learn to be polite. The road prefers the impolite ones, the ones who stop, the ones who answer phones that ring from rooms where no one waits.